episode 49, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Great. So yes, you were talking we're just having a chat before, and you were suggesting I talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that in Japan. Sounds
Let's
like
kick things off there. Yeah. So.
yeah, sounds like a plan. So we went and saw the Shibuya Scramble. So it's quite famous. It's a very busy crosswalk across the road in Tokyo. It's quite famous, and you see it a lot. You see it on a lot of the videos when they're talking about Tokyo and so forth. And of course, it really is something to go and see. I think it's something like 3,000 up to around 3,000 people go across every time, at least during the day. I think it'll be up to 3,000 people can go across. And yes, I walked across it and walked back. It's kind of cool. There were all sorts of. I think actually it might almost have become busier now, but because it's become a bit of a tourist thing, more tourists are actually going. So I think possibly it might almost be a self-perpetuating now, where
Hmm.
because it's become a tourist thing, lots of tourists are appearing walking across the road and walking back. So anyway, I'm sure there's poor local people who are just wanting to get across the road and they've got to deal with thousands of tourists. Well,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
were while we were standing there, there were some guys who, for some reason, I think were British. I don't think I heard them speak, but I'm just sure they were British,
Mm.
and they were jumping up and waving, and I think there was somebody recording from a distance or something. So
Right.
yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to go and see. Shibuya is quite a busy area compared to where we were staying in Asakusa. Asakusa's quite a bit of an older area. There's actually a really old temple there that's been around since the sixth or seventh century, I think. Um, anyway, at the temple they said something about when this temple was built, Tokyo was a grass field. So I think I might have
Mm.
mentioned anyway. But anyway, Shibuya is very busy. It's so busy, in fact, that I was relying on my phone's GPS, and it kept walking me around in circles for a while because the tall
Mm.
buildings and so many devices were basically confusing the GPS. So anyway, I got there. We got there. We also visited an area called Harajuku. And now Tokyo is obviously an enormous city. I've heard figures like 37 million. I've even heard figures like 43 million. So enormous city, a lot of different suburbs, a lot of different areas that are quite different. Harajuku is quite a bit more of an upmarket area, but it was still quite really nice to see it actually. See that
Mm.
there's quite a lot of variety. I mentioned Asakusa, that's where we were staying, and I really liked it actually. And I think we're planning to go again, and I would stay in the same area again.
Are
So
you planning to go again? Really? I haven't been able
yes,
to go to Japan in
no,
ages,
no,
and you're
really,
actually planning to go again. Well,
we're
not
actually
jealous
planning to
enough.
go again. It is true. So
Okay.
not for a little while, but there is a
Mm.
plan to go again. So and I would stay in the same area. In fact, use some of the same places we'd used in the area. So yeah, it's a sort of a little, I guess, older residential area, not quite as busy.
Mhm.
Yeah, so good area to stay in, I think, if anyone's considering visiting Tokyo. And it's actually very close to the Solamachi Mall, which is quite a large mall in Tokyo, and a place called Skytree. And Skytree is actually quite a high tower that leads, I think it's up to about 450 meters that you can go up and see. And you can get a really good view of Tokyo. So that was actually the last thing we did before we left.
Mm.
We went up to the Skytree and was able to get a really good view of the city at night. So yeah, so really loved the trip. Yeah, we will be going
Mm.
back.
Yeah,
Mm.
sounds good.
I still have plans to climb Mount Fuji, and of course you can't do that in the winter; it's too dangerous. So
Right. Yes.
I'll have to be there in the summer months at some point to be able to do that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
I think I mentioned Akihabara last time. Akihabara is the center of manga and anime culture in
Well, yeah,
Tokyo.
but it's also more of the some of the tech stuff is there too, I think. So.
Yep. And what's that game? There's a game you've got to be 20 to play it. It's like a gambling game. I've forgotten the name.
Hmm.
Anyway, we saw a few of those there as well.
Okay.
Uh, uh, uh,
I'm not thinking of it. So.
Pachinko?
Oh yeah, 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 that. Yes.
Yeah, the Pachinko. Yeah. So
Hmm.
we saw a few Pachinko places there as well. Yes.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and it's interesting to see you've got people dressed up and so forth on the street. I guess they're trying to encourage you to go into their shops and stuff. But it was pretty cool. So
Right, yeah, yeah.
even though I'm not so much the anime guy, I mean I watched a bit of anime in the 80s,
Hmm.
but but it's still very cool to see.
Yeah.
So next topic I've got, I think you've got one that you want to talk about. We're going to leave that closer to the end, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. I don't think I mentioned this last time because I didn't have it on my records for last time.
Hmm.
But Clementine Ford is a very well-known feminist in Australia. She said quite a lot of offensive things about men over the years, and sometimes she's got in trouble for them. Other times she hasn't got in trouble for them.
Hmm.
It appears she's considering starting an OnlyFans page. So
Does she have any fans?
well, a few feminist fans, I suppose. I don't know
Hmm.
how that will work out for her. So,
Right, yeah.
yes, can't wait to see what happens there. That's all I'm going to say on that. But
Hmm.
that was reported, I think, just before the last episode. I didn't yet actually put it in. So, definitely something to look out for, I suppose.
I can't wait to not subscribe to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
next one is quite a shift from moving forward to geopolitics.
Hmm.
Syria. Syria, as I've mentioned before, I have quite a long-standing interest in the Middle East, and something's really major has happened. The Syrian civil war has, of course, been going on for 13 years or something along those lines. A few years ago, it looked like it was Bashar al-Assad appeared to have won, and it was sort of declared over at one point, but then it wasn't really over, and there was still fighting going on. But that went on for a few more years until about 2 weeks ago, when suddenly various opposition forces pushed back and captured Damascus, the capital, and Bashar fled.
Hmm.
So this is from the point of view of someone with interest in the Middle East. This is nothing short of astounding. I mean, he's been the Assad family's been in charge of Syria since before I was born.
Right.
So Hafez Assad, his
Hmm.
father, and Bashar, is the son. Interestingly enough, Bashar is actually a qualified ophthalmologist, and he studied in the UK and was, I believe, practicing as an ophthalmologist. And then his
Hmm.
older brother, who was supposed to take over the country, was unexpectedly killed in a car accident. And so he, of course, had to step up. So he gave up his career as a doctor, as a specialist, and moved to Syria and became a dictator instead. So anyway, yeah. So it's interesting. He's fled to Russia, and the new government has previously has ties to some what could be considered some more extremist groups. However, they've apparently been trying to disavow those ties for a number of years, and they've been saying some of the right things lately about being more moderate. Whether it pans out or not, I think it
Hmm.
remains to be seen. But it would be good if they did. But we might even see a move towards democracy in Syria or something like that. But I don't know. I think it's too early to call.
Right.
But the Russians have a bit of a problem because the Russians have actually fought against this group before, and now they've got a major naval base or had a major naval base in Syria, and they also had a large air base. And there was a report that they were actually approaching the new government, seeing if they can negotiate to keep it. But given that these bases have been used to attack these people, the new government in the past, I didn't think there was much chance that was going to happen. And it appears that Russia is now shifting focus to Libya and might be actually going to move its naval base to Libya. So it's my view that the main reason that Russia backed Syria so hard for all that through the civil war was because they were trying to keep this naval base in Syria. So, and they may have lost it after all these years. Anyway, but they may have another one in Libya. So that's quite a big shift. I mean, a lot of people don't pay much attention to the Middle East, but this is really quite big from the point of view of the Middle
Right.
East. Yeah.
Hmm.
Israel has crossed over into Syria and has occupied territory there. It's my view that they won't stay. There's a lot of people saying they think they will. I don't think they will. It'll be too expensive. It'll also be too difficult to occupy that much
Okay.
territory, I think, in the
Interesting.
long term. They might stay for a few months, a year maybe, but I think sooner or later they'll pull back to the Golan
Mhm.
Heights. Yeah, it'll just be too hard, I think, for them. Um, so that's all I have on Syria. I don't know if I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but whether you have much of an interest in that area or
Well, it's one of the more difficult things for me to kind of wrap my head around, to be sure. Yeah, but I do note that this is one of the more uh, significant kind of like out of nowhere kind of outcomes, I think. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, and really the way it happened quite quickly. I don't think anybody expected that. I think this one has really caught probably caught I suspect caught the intelligence services with their pants down. I very much doubt they thought that Bashar al-Assad's regime would collapse in a couple of weeks. Uh, so the next one I have is an Australian politician who I believe I have mentioned before. Her name is Zali Steggall.
mhm.
And she's come out with recently. Now let me just reach over and get the exact comments that she made. This is concerning what's called baseload power, which is really, when people talk about it, they're really talking about the supply of baseload power. Basically, how do we maintain the grid in a stable fashion? And she's come out and said uh, that baseload power is an antiquated concept. And I think she had a few other comments on that in relation to that as well. So the uh, I did some looking, and it appears that some people are starting to talk about the possibility of doing without baseload power. I'm quite concerned by this idea, but at the very least, even the serious people who are talking about this, the researchers and so forth, all they're doing is running computer models and predicting it might be possible. That's a far cry from saying we should be getting rid of baseload power, and it's an antiquated concept, as this politician said. So I suspect she's going to get a bit of pushback on this.
Mhm.
Yeah, because this is a big deal. There are some people who obviously want to rely heavily on renewables, and I am a huge fan of renewable power as long as we can keep the lights on. But yeah, I think at the moment we need something to maintain that baseload power, whether it's coal, nuclear, whatever. I'm a fan of coal. Sorry, I should say I'm a fan of nuclear for Australia. Australia only has one nuclear power reactor, and it's used for research and making medicines. Despite having one of the largest, if not the largest, supply of uranium in the world and one of the largest supplies of thorium in the world, Australia does not use nuclear. It does not use nuclear power.
Right.
Yeah, but there's finally a push towards doing it, and I'm a big fan of this. I think it's something we need to do. Yep, that's all I have on Zali Steggall and
Mhm.
nuclear power.
Yep.
The next one is Crystal Mangum. Now she's quite interesting. Do you recall the Duke lacrosse
Yes,
case
that
in
that I do recall.
2006?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, right. So Crystal Mangum falsely accused three men of raping her in 2006. They were all members of the Duke University lacrosse team,
Mhm.
and she was an exotic dancer. And I believe they said that she claimed they locked her in a room or something and then raped her. Now, this was, of course, now 18 years ago. She's just in the last few days admitted it was false.
Mhm.
Admittedly that she falsely accused them. So, uh, oh, and also too, in the meantime, she's currently in jail because she was found guilty of secondary murder
Mhm.
for the murder of her boyfriend, Reginald Dale, and she'd also previously been charged in relation with attempted murder in relation to injuries to another former partner. And in that case, she was convicted of various other offences, but not convicted of attempted. I think they dropped the attempted murder charge and preferred lesser charges, including delinquency of a juvenile, injury to personal property, and resisting a public officer, which really does sound like they've really just downgraded that. I'm sure no man would have got those.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so she's currently serving 14 to 18 years in prison, convicted in 2013, or the offence occurred in 2013, so I think convicted in
Mhm.
2014. And anyway, yes, has just admitted that it was a false accusation.
Right. Yeah. Well, good for her, right? I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Took Would have been, yeah, exactly. Would have been nice if if she'd had some. I don't know what drove it now, but if it's a conscience, it would have been nice if she had some conscience 18 years ago. So anyway,
Right.
uh, The next one I have on my list is woke, which I think you wanted to talk about.
Okay, sounds good. And I actually kind of racked up a few more things to talk about after that, if that's all right
Great,
with you.
go
All
for
right,
it.
so yeah. So that's been on my mind as of late because so sometimes I would browse YouTube on days I just don't really want to do a whole lot of work, just want to watch some videos, right? And so forth. And sometimes, don't ask why, but it could be anywhere from some kind of uh, movies and show reviews to like maybe some art related channels or maybe some game and fandom related channels and then it kind of branches off into stuff I won't even care to watch because I'll get recommendations and so forth because
Yeah.
that's how YouTube tends to work. And sometimes and some of this I'm kind of deriving straight from thumbnail alone is there's more visible denialism about woke that I'm kind of perceiving as of late. And this is even coming from people who may claim to recognize a certain problem in whatever field they're covering, say universities or modern movies or the state of a certain game like Dungeons and Dragons or Magic or whatever. And they would list problems, but along the way say that no, it's not woke that's the problem. I don't even know what woke is. That's their claim is I don't even know what it's supposed to mean.
Yeah.
But then would proceed to talk about like for example, I think there was this one Star Wars related channel. I'm not even a big Star Wars fan, but sometimes I kind of click because I know something about the original property. Um, you're kind of critiquing that uh, the new sequel series were not good, but that woke is not the thing that made it bad, but then proceeding to say that we got some new shows lining up that is directed by an activist, and I fully support this. We'll see how it goes. You know, it just sounds like what's the nicest way to put this? It's cognitive dissonance. You know,
Yes.
it's
So,
straight up stupid.
yeah. Interestingly enough, obviously, woke, it's very clear that woke has harmed a lot of these things. Uh, Personally, I would say that sometimes there were things as well as woke which made them terrible, and a few
Of
times,
course.
like for example, Star Trek Discovery, I didn't even get to it being woke. It was so bad that the other things were
Mhm.
so bad that I never even got to it to see the really woke
Right.
stuff. Although I know a bit about it, but yes, it obviously is a huge problem. So I guess my first comments would be woke started with the people who called themselves woke. It wasn't
Yes.
originally a term of derision. It was a term that people used for themselves and originally came from stay woke. And we actually have a pretty good idea where it came from. So, in fact, I believe it was, African American Vernacular English is where it originally came
Yes.
from. Yeah,
Mhm.
to stay alert to racial prejudice and discrimination. And that was, I think it goes right back several decades. In fact, yeah, 1930s. I think the 90 it can be seen back as far as the 1930s.
Right.
Um, right. So many people today, I see people saying, I think like basically saying, like you say, oh, I don't know even what woke is, or anyone who still uses the term woke, is I don't know, they might make a variety of comments about them. I think all these comments just mean that we've successfully co-opted the term. That's
Of
my view.
course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's starting to resonate with people, but these what I would otherwise call progressives and so forth, perhaps, are kind of panicking a bit. I think they're catching on. And I don't know, this seemed to kind of spring up after the Trump re-inauguration or something like that. I don't know, maybe that's in my mind, but that's kind of like the general idea where I started to see these things kind of pop up and make themselves more obvious in my feed.
It certainly
So,
brought some stuff into focus. I mean, the 4B
mm,
movement, for example, which has been in Korea for years and we've known
mm,
about for years,
right,
it was really popped into their consciousness only since the election. So
mm,
you've got a lot of American women who are, of course, or there's some vocal American women who are claiming that they're part of 4B. And I think I did mention it last time, and I'm going to call it
yeah, we did.
4B is going to be a failure. So
Mm,
sex strikes don't work. and 4B will be a failure. And I will be regularly mentioning it as often as possible. Like, no, probably about once a month. I'm planning to mention it and say, "Hey, how's 4B going?" You know, because I think it's really important. A lot of what I do these days is actually making sure the wokies can't forget the things they've done down the road. So I record their names on Wiki for Men, as long as it's it's all public information. So I'm drawing from public sources, but I'm recording their names, recording what they've said, and so forth. Mostly only people who have got a following. Not always. Sometimes people have made things have said things that are so egregiously awful that I've given them an entry on Wiki for Men anyway, even though they're not particularly well known. But everything is public. But it's about, in my view, it's about making sure that they're called to account for these things when it's all over. And the cracks are really showing now. There's a lot more pushback against woke from the broader community. People who 5 years ago would have laughed at us and said that, you know, we were gender warriors or whatever it happened to be. That's one term that's actually being used by an academic. I won't name him, but a particular academic who has raised these issues has called us gender warriors.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And what we understand as woke now, we usually talk about it in the sense of media, and it's right. And you know, not that the origins of it were particularly good ways to tackle any given issue. It's like kind of giving credence to feminism for changing societal attitudes. Likewise, there were racial changing societal attitudes that I think the stay woke people would have been keen to take credit for, I think.
And I think we can conclusively say that feminism and the other woke movements weren't the driver of that. They were kind of hitched their wagon to it and carried along. And I'd like to offer 1960s Star Trek as a perfect example of that. Now, you'll often hear wokies say something like, "Oh, you know, Star Trek was always progressive." Okay, well, yes, but the progressivism of the 1960s is not the progressivism of today. So, Star Trek in the 1960s was go on.
So the problem with something like Discovery and onwards is that they are about finding public opinion and writing with it. That is the Star Trek of today. Whereas Star Trek kind of had to stand on its own. It didn't try to appeal to the existing audience, which might have not wanted the Uhuras and the Sulus and whoever.
There's plenty of examples like that. Uhura, Sulu. There's a particular episode I don't recall the name of now, but I'm sure if you've watched the original series as much as I have, I'm sure you remember it well. There were two warring factions on a planet, and the faces were black and white, but the white was opposite, if you recall.
Let that be your last battlefield.
Thank you.
The persecuted class, which may or may not have been embellished, is white on the right side.
Right. Okay. Right. And they were being persecuted by the ones who were white on the left side.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. They mentioned right side specifically. So he was black on the right side is his words. Okay. It's like as if the right side was kind of important. That's my analysis of it. Right. But yeah. So it's left sufficiently ambiguous. Obviously, their relations were beyond contentious, but we don't know if Lokai's people, that's white on the right side guy, is persecuted because of no reason or whatever. But in any case, he kind of curries favor among anywhere he goes and people he meets and so forth. So, you know, neither side is really all that sympathetic.
Right. Okay. It's been many years since I saw that episode. In fact, I've been meaning to see it again. Okay. That's interesting because my recollection was that it was a pretty clear persecution of one side, but I was probably watching it like over, it's been quite a long time actually. So since I saw that, I'm going to go, all right, I'll go watch it again. But I do think it was interesting. They're obviously doing some sort of analog to Earth, as they've done and did in many episodes.
Right. I think a lot of it has to do with Lokai being more manipulative and to try and seek help and asylum and so forth. Right. So right. So and then berates them, the Enterprise crew, for being unhelpful when it turns out that both of them are stronger than the Enterprise put together. I mean, the only reason they were able to contain it is because Kirk threatened self-destruct. So at first. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, clearly I need to go watch that episode again, actually, because I barely remember that bit. So, yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I
Yeah.
wonder if it's been a really long time since I saw that one, actually.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I try to have like a Star Trek run through every so often. I'm actually
Nice.
back into season 3 of original series, so
Right.
I'll be watching the episode soon myself anyway.
Good. So I've done that with Next Generation, DS9 and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, but I haven't
Mhm.
done it with the original series so much. So yeah, probably should.
It's worth it because
Mm.
more to the point on the woke thing.
Mm.
Anything modern today is ashamed of the past, especially the original series. They're ashamed that perhaps that Kirk and company, Kirk is a archetypal white guy. I'm sure he's a man, and
Presses the crew with his presence, right? Yes.
there's that, and the women are dressed in that particular kind of way, and
Yeah.
I guess because of the general social attitudes at the time, they're not they don't appear to be nearly as active as the women are kind of portrayed today. But it's funny because a little bit more because there's a lot for me to speak about this subject. Is that when it comes to the gay stuff, the LGBT and so forth, if it had any meaning in the past, um, it was about, just because they are in this category, don't uh, deny basic human rights, don't
Mm.
treat them as second-class citizens and so forth. But
Mm.
now, what it mean the whole LGBT thing means is that uh, we should be there should be parity of that with the straights, like as if they're as common as the straight people. So we're going to
Yes,
be
yes.
sure that there is at
Equity,
least half gay, at least, yeah,
equity versus equality.
exactly, right.
Yeah.
So DEI is the big uh, uh, component problem to the woke crisis. Now, and it's very, they say woke is not a problem because what they're talking about is the pushback against woke
Mm.
as it's being exposed when we're
Yes.
talking about, yeah, right. And that's why they're saying it's, but this is supposed to be a good thing, so it's not a problem. I suppose that's what they're trying to kind of contort their head around, I think. Yeah. But yeah, it's woke denialism, and I think it's something we need to it's a term that we need to kind of bring more to the forefront now that it's kind of taken root.
So that
Um,
was, and this is something I've definitely seen, as I was saying. But this is one of the reasons that I put. Well, obviously we had to have a work page on Wiki for Men,
mhm,
uh, but I tried to develop a definition on there that I think is fairly good and fairly it's sort of
mhm.
all encompassing. So it's quite long, so I think people can look at it on Wiki for Men. But I did want to mention. And I think I have mentioned this page before in an episode quite a while ago. So there's an Australian publication, a website called Crikey.
Yes.
Crikey would call themselves woke, okay? And they wrote an article a number of years ago about woke and about the definitions. Now, I think they probably wouldn't write the same article today. That would be my suspicion. But anyway, I think I've got an archive copy of it. I hope so. Should do, because I would hope it's still there. Anyway, they propose definitions for woke, both for someone who supports woke and for someone who opposes it. And I really liked their definitions, despite themselves being woke, and there and people and organizations that are woke are not known for being fair-handed in their portrayals. I have to say, I thought the article was actually pretty fair. So I actually quoted their definitions in the Wiki for Men page, and rather than go through
Yeah.
my longer definition, which you'll see on the page, I'm just going to quickly quote this one. Crikey suggested that a person who supports woke would define woke as to be informed, educated on, and aware of social injustices. Okay. And somebody who opposes woke would put it as to be overly politically correct and to police other people's words. And I think both are quite fair definitions for someone who supported someone who opposes woke. And there you have from right out of the mouths of some of people who would call themselves woke, definitions and endorsements that woke is real, and there it is.
Mm-hmm. And this seems like it's from an alternate universe or something like that, right? I mean, because
when I read it at first years ago, I couldn't believe it almost because it's not really normal for people and organizations who I would call woke to be in any way fair-handed. In fact, they tend to come across as quite authoritarian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But no, there it was. And as I said, I think it's still there, but I'm quite certain I've got an archive copy here. Yes, I do, in fact, have an archive copy. And actually, it was March 2023, actually a little bit later than I thought, actually. So, yeah, the article did claim that people liked being woke. So that bit I didn't agree with. I mean, some people like being woke, but I think it's pretty clear that a large proportion of the population don't and are pushing back against it now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, because
in any case,
we've got we got blatant injustice against white males, Asians kind of get kind of the default
yes.
racist thing too, and which is more absurd in the Western world, I think.
Yes, that's
That
something that's increasingly getting raised, actually.
mhm.
I've even heard them
Right,
say Asians are white, this sort of thing.
right, exactly,
So,
right.
yep,
Mhm.
yep.
Yeah, right. But so that's a social injustice, if you will, that they're not aware of, or choose to ignore. Maybe woke is about being aware of the injustices, but cover it up and practice and pretend it doesn't exist.
Being very selective about it, exactly. That's
Right,
right.
yeah. But it's kind of like scientism almost. It's like what a lot of my critique of the of the liberal left actually is that they have the claim on things like science and reason, but
Mm.
then with that kind of plastered right on their chest with a badge of reason and so forth, sanity allegedly, they of course commit whatever they want outside of that, but they always have that. But we're the side of reason. Um, they can fall back on that and defend
Well, they
themselves.
certainly claim that, exactly. Yes,
Well, yeah.
but with research being increasingly biased as a result of politics, which is not entirely new. There's certainly been plenty of
No.
cases of that in the past, but normally, I guess like for example, if you looked at Nazi Germany, there was plenty of research that they used to back up their various claims and so forth that their own scientists and researchers and psychologists and whatnot had come up with. But of course, and they also based their ideology on eugenics, which of course a lot of people don't know was really big in England. So England was the center of eugenics, and we know the Nazis actually did read eugenics documents that came out of the UK and based their ideology partly on that. But I guess democratic countries were a little better for a long time in terms of the research not being as biased, but we are now seeing a lot of bias coming into research, unfortunately, and making more of it questionable as a result, unfortunately.
Right.
Yep.
Sure. Right. Now, so how do we fight this thing is something we need to kind of talk more about, because there aren't a lot of good ways postulated to fight it from too many in my mind. So,
well, the method that I've adopted and that I've been working towards all these years is to essentially disseminate information because basically politics is, as I like to say, politics is downstream from culture. Politicians won't care until the people care. So we had to make the people care. And I think that we, men's rights, other movements have actually been quite effective in doing that. Anti-IDPOL groups. I think that we've actually been quite effective in doing that, and it's really taking off now.
yeah, to be sure. So,
Yeah. So
and
that's
I think
my belief anyway.
we're right. And there's kind of a bit of a social fear that in certain things like fandoms and like subcultures and communities and so forth, because I think their default attitude is that the atmosphere is woke, so one must pander to it. But maybe
Mhm.
some of them don't want to do that. So I think if we can find a way to kind of reach out and find people who are sick of this garbage, and they need to be a little bit better than just sick of it. But
Mhm.
I think we should try and associate more and solidify that kind of mini community, I suppose, kind of like it seems kind of strange that I would talk about factions and so forth, but
Mhm.
but I think that's something we might have to kind of somewhat resort to, at least unofficially.
That's
And
interesting. So getting more into like obviously areas you'd normally already be interested in, but
mhm.
dropping anti-woke stuff in into conversations and so forth, and getting it more normalized in that into that environment.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah, to be kind
yeah,
of try and find the right people and
yeah.
uh make it more of a place where we can kind of be sensible.
Yes. So
Mhm.
I can give you a couple of examples where things like that have happened to, but only to a limited extent, perhaps. So in the free and open source community, which I've of course been involved with for decades, it has unfortunately become very woke,
Mhm.
and that's obviously been a problem. However, not everybody has. There's one man by the name of Eric S. Raymond who has spoken out against it to a certain extent. Although I haven't heard much from him recently, but he has said things in the past, and he's not afraid to speak out. He's got a very high profile. He got a lot of hate for it, but nevertheless, it's he's at least was willing to do that. Are you of course familiar with Richard Stallman?
I think so.
Yeah, so Richard Stallman started the Free Software Foundation and got the GNU project going. So GNU, for those who don't know, Unix is an operating system. Linux is an implementation of Unix. It's the one that's dominant today and has been dominant
Yeah.
for about 20 years. Linux runs the world, but just let's put that right out there because a lot of people say, "Oh, does anyone use Linux?" Well, we all use Linux all the time. You just don't see it. It's
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
It runs the world. But anyway, bit of a story. So Richard Stallman in the 1980s, it all started with a printer. I mean, we know what printers are like and how proprietary they are. Well, in the 1980s, they were proprietary to a lot of them. And he's a talented coder, and he found a bug in a printer driver, and he wanted to fix it. And he discovered to his horror that he didn't have the source code to the printer driver. It was proprietary and closed source, and he couldn't fix the bug. And this actually started him thinking about the idea of encouraging more people to distribute source codes and so forth. So he started the GNU project that was going to be an implementation of the Unix operating system, but all the source code was open and so forth. And he developed the GNU General Public License, the GPL, which is one of the preeminent free and open source licenses even today. Anyway, he actually did everything. They did everything by the late 1980s, early 1990s. They'd pretty much written everything they needed for this operating system, except the kernel, which is the core of the operating system.
Mhm.
And at around about this time, as luck would have it, now other operating systems that were free were available at the same time, or were becoming available around the same time. FreeBSD, NetBSD.
Mhm.
Anyway, at around about this time, a young Finnish university student decided to have a bit of a play around and develop his own kernel, just to sort of just learn how Unix worked, and that was the origins of Linux. And he took the GNU operating system, which remember had everything except the kernel, put it with his kernel, and he started playing around with it, and that was the origin of Linux. And the next thing he knew, popularity just exploded, and it grew exponentially for many years. And now 30 plus years on, now 33, 34 years on, obviously it's been the dominant operating system for about 20 years. So, but anyway, that's so just to give you some a background there about GNU and so forth. But Richard Stallman was cancelled a few years ago, and accusations were made about him online, about him saying inappropriate things online and so forth.
Right.
And he was actually temporarily removed from. He was removed from the can't recall whether he resigned or whether he was removed, but from the free leadership of the Free Software Foundation, which was the organization he'd founded to manage the GNU project and to propagate free and open source software. And anyway, a year or so, a year, 18 months later, I'm going from memory now, I haven't reviewed it recently, he was returned to the position. And anyway, but there was an attempt to cancel him. Linus Torvalds, of course, who I mentioned, the Finnish programmer, he's known for being a little bit abrupt, and he went away and did sort of, I don't know, some training to help him with interpersonal relationships and so forth. It took about a month off and did that sort of thing, and it was talked about being a bit of a cancellation too, although obviously not at the same degree. But there's been a lot of work in there, and there has been pushback against the leadership. But as we saw, Richard Stallman returned after a period of time, whether it's 12 or 18 months or 2 years or whatever it happened to be, and Linus Torvalds is still going strong in a leadership role. Now, there was a claim made at one point that some people were trying to Now, I'm not in any way asserting the veracity of this claim, but the claim was circulated that some people were trying to falsely accuse Linus Torvalds of something like sexual assault, and that I'm not suggesting anyway that any accusation was ever made, but the claim was made that he was being targeted, and that people knew that, and that he was being accompanied by basically minders when he was at conferences, so he would always have an independent witness if an accusation was made. To my knowledge, no accusation has been made since that claim was made several years ago, but it could be because he has minders with him. Anyway, that claim has been made. So if there's any truth to that, then that would be an attempt to have tried to cancel another major figure in free and open source. So unfortunately, it's an area, it's a movement that has brought into woke too much. Another one is, of course, the skeptics movement, where there was atheism plus at one point. This is going back quite a number of years, where there was quite a large split in the skeptics and atheist movement in relation to woke and anti-woke. And another example is it's a little bit of a lesser one, but I quite like it, and I'm in this group on Facebook. There's apparently in the birding community, it's in bird watching community. There's been a lot of woke, right? And so somebody, like a gentleman I know on Facebook, started an anti-woke birding Facebook group, and it's called Making Birding Great Again. So if you like bird watching, and I've done some bird watching in the past, I'm not actively doing it, but I do like sitting in the group and looking at some of the photos they have and so forth. So, but it's called, yes, Making Birding Great Again, which I thought was a cute name.
What was the woke grievance there? That crows are portrayed as black people? What?
I don't know. I was never in the woke groups that caused the problem, but I think it was perhaps more along the lines of if people even said anything that was woke, anything that was anti-woke, they were being booted out of the groups very rapidly, or if it was, or if they were perceived as anti-woke, they were being booted out of the group. So that's what prompted this gentleman, I think, to create their own group where they could just enjoy their hobby, without concern.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah,
and
yeah. I've also seen another Facebook group that's to do with Deep Space Nine, and it seems to be mildly anti-woke, where people have made jokes, and some people have complained about it, and then a bunch of other people basically say, well, deal with it, it's a joke, and so people can get away with being a little bit more, down to earth and not quite so uptight. I think I may have mentioned the name of that group before, but anyway, I don't recall.
Okay, right, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think there are enough things in Next Generation to Voyager, Star Trek that kind of fall under woke to some extent by today's standards, but at least there was it's. I almost want to say it's forgivable. It's not as flagrant and in your face as it is today, I think. Yes.
I think there's certainly a lot of Star Trek has always been progressive, right? But of course, progressivism has changed. I can't recall anything in DS9 or Voyager that's identity politics, because it was all They were both done
Yeah,
and dusted before Paul was really
right,
going.
but remember that the era is it still kind of thinks that feminism is this kind of brilliant idea at the time, and
That's
it's
true.
yeah, right, and also
Yeah.
especially with DS9, they love to kind of toy with um like some communist ideas a little bit because they're kind of
Oh,
using Quark as a
yes.
foil, basically he's see this is what a capitalist is. This is evil and greedy, and so
Yes,
forth.
yes,
Right, right.
yes.
And when Rom's brother becomes the Grand Nagus towards the end of the series, he introduces income tax and what
Yeah.
and they think this is this big thing. So, like the seeds of woke were in there, and it's unfortunate, but
And that's a good point. And actually, I'm now thinking about it, in Ferengi society, women were confined to the home, couldn't wear clothes, and had essentially no rights. And
right.
yes, you're right. It did always strike me that they were trying to make a backhanded slap against Western society or something like.
It's
Obviously, not
because
taking it literally, but
right, yeah,
yeah,
like I mean, that's it's the writing about that is cognitively dissonant because like what why if capitalism is the ultimate aim you're going for, if why annex a whole demographic out from participating in the market,
mm,
and then they think that
quite right.
like over time they do that with Quark's mother and everything like that. So they portraying this brilliant idea. Why didn't we think of that kind of
Yeah,
a
no,
thing, which is
you're right. In fact, yeah, for those who don't know, yeah, so
mhm,
women's rights were essentially an issue in Ferengi society, which evolved as the series progressed. Exactly.
right, which I
And
call
yeah,
fake issue. I call it bad writing.
yeah, because I don't
Right.
think they were criticizing Saudi Arabia when they were doing that. They were criticizing
Hmm.
the West. Yeah.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah.
Even if it was gently, and you're right,
Mhm.
it wasn't the same as today. It wasn't so in your face. That's right.
Right, yes, right, yeah.
It was
Yeah.
fairly gentle, and it was
Mhm.
treated as a lighthearted subject.
Right, right, sure. But remember, if you run a lemonade stand, you're a bad profiteering capitalist.
Well,
Yes, okay.
unless, it's interesting. They can't decide whether the Federation doesn't use money or the Federation doesn't use currency because they supposedly don't use money, but then they,
There's
economic
credits.
concepts related to money turn up from time to time. So,
Right.
yes,
Because they've had their own the Federation has their own credit system and so forth. And I believe that Will Riker even went and bet successfully in one of Quark's tables. That was a plot in some next gen episode where Quark had a
right.
cameo.
Yep,
But they introduced Latinum because that was supposed to be something that they can't successfully replicate. So there
that's
was a
right.
scarcity in that one. So they kind of had a
That's right.
more of a semblance of, right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's interesting because I think it's saying you live in, I mean, we could just simply take the view that the Federation is a cashless society, but that's very different to it being a moneyless society. So yes,
Exactly, right, yeah.
yeah,
And you can't get rid of the profit motive, and you shouldn't. I think the profit motive is even from a moral sense just fine. Because that is the basis by which you actually make a voluntary transaction. What's in it for me gets a bad rep, but it's actually, it also includes things like your personal values. How can
yes,
it match my values? It's not about parasitism, at least
mhm,
it shouldn't be. So it. So I could go on a whole tangent about
yes.
that I don't really care to do right now, um,
Might be an
you know
interesting one for a future episode, though.
yeah, yeah, sure. Because I'm already on a roll on this woke thing because I got a little bit more to say about that.
Yeah, good.
So yeah, so one thing that's going to keep the woke in business, sadly, a big contributor to that is bad ways to fight it, I think. Because if we make the anti-woke side look kind of bad, then the woke are going to have too much of a good case to kind of keep on going. So, you know, when you're doing something to resist woke, do it in a way that it kind of ignores it. If you're a
Yes,
creative writer, kind of like make competent movies like you used to.
yes,
Even if they're not competent, make them like you used to.
yes.
So just keep on making things that ignore the the idiotic standards of diversity, equity, and inclusion that
Yes,
we've
I
got going
agree.
on. Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, so don't just make a bad anti-woke thing, because that a good way to kill a movement is arguing for it badly. Um,
No,
and
I agree. Just do what you want to do creatively. I agree 100%. And
mhm.
ignore the woke. Yes.
Right,
That is
yeah,
also
sure,
the
yeah,
view I've taken
right,
to creative
right, yeah,
efforts.
right. And so that leaves open a very interesting kind of notion or question nowadays. How many gay people should you include in a fictional story? How many, well, what percentage should be black, should be white? It's,
So
it's such a modern question,
yeah,
so
so I
yeah.
would suggest that the correct answer to that question
Mm,
is the way that it used to be done, which is this character white, black, whatever? Does it matter? Maybe it does in the
mm,
story, and if it does matter in the story, then that probably gives you your answer. That's the way I look at it. Same thing for a gay character. Does it make mad? Is there a does it should this character be gay? Does that work for the character? Is that a driver for the character? Maybe it's the reason the character, maybe the character is
mm.
experiencing discrimination or something in a historical setting, and that's the driver for the story.
Right,
Does
yeah,
it make sense from the point of view of the story,
right,
rather
yeah.
than
Mhm.
shoehorning it in?
Right, yeah, yeah, sure. And our grievance here is that almost all of it nowadays is shoehorned in,
Mm.
because it's like you had to kind of tick off some marks. You had to kind of make sure you're represented. I once called this representation politics, in a very old, not very old, but in an article I did once for Voice for Men. But um, so what needs to happen now is that, maybe take a risk and have no gays in it, at
Mm.
least, right, at least not outwardly saying so, and
Yes,
see what happens.
absolutely. Or moreover, maybe the character sexuality is not actually relevant to the
Right,
story in many
that's
cases.
what I mean more.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
we simply
right.
don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah,
Hmm.
which of course is
Yeah.
the way a lot of stories were written before identity politics really took off.
Right, exactly. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And what we still have to do is that, don't uh don't play nice with the anti-woke that still do the gynocentrism thing.
Yeah,
Like we need to kind of have better standards for anti-woke, to be sure. I've
yeah,
Because too many of them like holding on to the misandry too much. Maybe
yeah.
they're at the behest of their wives, or who they want to be their wives, and so forth. And
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 and in actual fact, a concern we've had at A Voice for Men for a number of years, I know you've been in discussions with this internally before, is that uh, now that things are starting to crumble for woke, that there might be a backlash, and we may yet go too far the other way, and we
Mhm.
might end up with some sort of gynocentric conservatism again, in which men
Yes.
are expected to fight and die for their society. And I don't want that any more than what we've got at the moment. I want a middle ground.
Okay. Okay, I'm not done with the woke thing, but that kind of
Cool.
brings up to the whole Daniel Penny thing that we've been kind of it's one thing I want to speak about, because yeah, I know, so I believe that what was it exactly that he was acquitted, I think it was.
Yes, I don't know much about the
Right, yeah,
Daniel Penny
sure.
story. So if you
So
want
yeah, yeah, yeah. So all I knew about this one is that he did some chivalrous thing, and there was kind of a risk of a BLM style riot impending, because of the verdict and so forth. Because I believe he was cleared, I think it was. Someone could correct me on that one, but the part of the reason why I'm kind of a bit half-assed on this thing is that was, again, because the chivalry thing. People are kind of praising him because of a chivalrous act, but whereas um, we're trying to warn people, don't help random women like this. Like don't be the hero,
yeah,
don't be the good guy. Don't,
100%.
you get, yeah, it's irresponsible and reckless to put yourself
That's
in a
right.
position to get yourself killed for people you don't even know.
Yep. If you see, and a lot of men feel that it's their obligation to do this, and it isn't, right? And it shouldn't be.
Right.
And even if we lived in a society once where men, were expected to step up to defend the society, and there was that gave a lot of social capital. That's all gone now, right?
Mhm.
Um, if you see, and this is a statement you'll hear from law enforcement authorities too,
Mhm.
if you see a crime being committed, right, call the police
Mhm.
because they are
Right.
armed, they are trained, and most importantly, they have lots and lots of resources. So if
Right.
the initial resources they deploy to the situation aren't sufficient, they will call in more resources and they will keep doing it until they control the situation.
Mhm.
That's their job. So yeah,
Right.
and be a good witness. Make a note, try to remember the details. Maybe
Yeah, it's
record if you
fine.
can safely
Yep.
do so. Do all that sort of
If
stuff.
you,
Be a
if
good
you can safely
witness.
do so, yes. You're right.
If
Yep.
you can safely do
Definitely.
so, exactly, because you may
Yes.
provoke. But if you start
There you
try recording certain situations, you could provoke someone. But if you think
go.
it's safe, do so,
Hmm.
and be a good witness, so that when the police arrive and they ask you details, give them good details, and
Hmm.
hopefully you
Right.
can help secure a conviction.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And I'll try not to be more long-winded about this, but I've said this before. I don't, I'm no friend to woke, right? But I think internal criticism is a fine thing. I've done it with our own men's movement when they get too traditional gynocentric in certain areas and so forth. But we got to be able to do this with our fellow anti-woke side too, because I think
Mm.
too many of them uh, call woke. The big mistake that they make is calling woke things that aren't, um,
Yeah.
or rather rephrase, calling things that aren't woke. That's
Yes.
you
I
know,
understand what you mean, and that is becoming more common. You're right.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
been
sure.
seeing a lot
And
more of that.
yeah, when we criticize marriage and we dissuade it from man, because the state of things is too bad, we're not woke for doing that, right? I mean, um, we're not trying to be the leftists, like the feminists trying to destroy the family or something like that, which the left are trying to destroy the family, but no, that's not our objective for this thing.
No.
We're warning to not associate with not to practice something that is bent on destroying the family. So don't confuse us here, you know. And also intactivists are not woke, okay? This is a huge thing that I get annoyed when some anti-wokers think that circumcision is based. That's the most cringeworthy thing I've ever
Mhm.
seen
Yes.
out of
And
everything.
that's been a common thread. I've seen that many, many times. And there have been
Mhm.
people who, yeah, disassociated with me because of my strong anti-circumcision stance.
Mhm.
Obviously been an intactivist for a long time. So
Right,
yes,
exactly.
yeah. And this is a traditionalist view to a certain extent.
Mhm. Right.
There are certainly a group of people in Western civilization who seem to think that circumcision is a normal procedure to perform on infant boys,
Right, yeah.
and it's ridiculous.
Exactly. Like, it is the one thing that makes me think that in this respect, at least, America is not so great.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's interesting actually, and a lot. I mean, maybe a lot. I mean, I know a lot of Americans probably don't know it, but essentially, circumcision is essentially common in Africa, the Middle
Hmm.
East, and United States of America. That's
Yes,
pretty much it.
and
Every other
recently,
Western
South
country
Korea.
has. Oh, thank you. And recently, South Korea. You are correct.
Yeah,
Yes. Thanks to the American influence, unfortunately.
exactly. Yeah.
It's rapidly declining in most other Western nations, including Australia and Canada. So
Hmm.
in fact, it's declining in Australia even more quickly than Canada. Canada is there's a lot of US influence, and it is a higher rate. At least last time I checked, but the Australian rate is now really quite low. I believe nationally, it's under about 10% of children are
Hmm.
boys now. So it's really, yeah. And I absolutely want
Hmm.
it to be illegal because it should be illegal because non-medical procedure, no other non-medical procedure is legal to perform.
Right. Yeah.
None procedure that isn't required for medical intervention, and yet this one gets an exception. No, it needs to be illegal with no religious exemptions.
Right. Sure.
And I
And
will
and
and I will say, go on.
And when it comes to the anti-woke kind of spouting this is in the face of them talking about opposing genital mutilation of kids under the whole trans thing,
Mm,
you know,
that's
you
right.
can't believe this is a pink hair level of cognitive dissonance here.
Yeah.
It's like, how, you're against genital mutilation of kids, but are
Except,
so dead on defending.
except this one time.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, for both anti-woke and the men's movement, I would actually consider circumcision to be like the gatekeep point. Like they're not a men's rights activist in my mind if they're not against this.
Yeah.
And
Um,
if you're an anti-woke who is for some reason for this, get out of my face. You know, I want nothing to do with you.
yeah.
Yeah.
A decade ago, I think a lot of intactivists were a bit more standoffish with us. But around that time and over the last decade, many of them come to realize that we're all committed intactivists too. And
Right.
now, of course, a number of leading intactivists have spoken at our conferences and so forth. So
Right, that's true, yeah. And I'll remind that intactivism kind of spans the political spectrum, to be sure,
it
right?
does, it
Yeah,
does.
right, yeah,
Which
because
is, yeah,
yeah, I mean, so like a big disagreement that I have with other intactivists is that universal healthcare is the solution, whereas I say that privatized healthcare is like the fastest
mm,
way to actually get rid of it in the United States. Because
right, yeah, okay,
if you go into a more state based version of healthcare here, it'll be like impossible to get rid of. They think it's the way to get rid of it, but it's not because the societal attitude is the thing that has to change. So we have to make it unprofitable by persuasion. That's
so
my take on the whole thing.
you might be interested to know then that in a number of Western countries, I know this definitely happened in Australia, and I believe it's happened in other Western countries, when circumcision was removed from the public health system as a procedure that would be covered by the public health system,
Mhm.
the rate dropped significantly.
I,
So
I know I know
when,
it did, but the problem
yeah,
is that America has such a clinging on to
yeah. Oh yeah.
the
Well,
notion. So if we just
yeah,
switch onto it now, we're
yeah.
not going to even get to the point where it gets dropped
Yeah. No, no, what
from
I
the
mean
from the.
is though, what I mean is when it became economically disincentivized, parents
Mhm.
didn't want to pay the money.
Oh, okay.
So
That's what
yeah,
you
yeah.
meant.
So
Okay,
so
yeah,
there is an economic driver there
yeah.
where yes, where
Right, yeah.
so once
Mhm.
well, I mean, and it even wasn't even that much, like $200 or something along that,
Mhm.
and
Right.
a significant proportion of parents didn't want to pay it, and the kids were
Mhm. Right.
saved.
Right, yeah, sure, yeah. And I'm not saying that the American health system is defensible. I'm just saying that I don't think universal healthcare is defensible
Yeah,
even more.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure people are going to raise a fuss about that, but
yeah.
about my opinion on that one. But
I mean,
it doesn't make me less of an anti-activist. I think
no, no.
we've got. I think we need to kind of. This is a hammer this shit out point.
Yeah.
We've got to, right.
To me, actually, it's interesting. To me, the key is to get that law passed to say that it's against the law to harm boys in this manner, and it's quite independent of how the health system may be set up. It's interesting, actually, that the argument's been raised because yes, to me, it's really about driving the recognition, the social recognition that
Well, yeah,
it's not okay to harm the boys, rather
yeah,
than
and so
tying it to an issue about
one of my biggest fears is that uh, attitudes are kind of we're kind of in a one way or the other kind of going back and forth, especially in the United States, is because so if it were to become law one time, then it's liable to shift back if the other side kind of takes over in that kind of cycle. So
right.
I
Yeah.
don't want a law passed without any of the persuasion having happened because it's just going to be meaningless
Yes.
in the long run. It'll be fucked,
Oh
and
yeah, well, I think you'd
right,
have to have that. Well, the only way you're going to get it passed, I think, in any Western country is for the community,
exactly.
is for sufficient
Yeah,
buy-in from the community. The fact
right,
that
yeah.
we in Australia have something like 90% of boys not being circumcised means that a lot of people, and this is certainly my perception from having talked to people, I think a fair proportion of the population Sorry, I just had my screen go blank on the computer.
Yeah, it happens
Um,
to me
uh,
sometimes.
right, yeah, okay, yeah. So yeah, a fair proportion. I think there's a large set of people in Australia, I think, who are opposed circumcision but aren't yet willing to make it illegal. But I do think that that is growing, and that so
Mhm.
it's trailing. You know, a lot of people now think it's inappropriate, and the proportion of the population who should make think it should be illegal is also growing. And when we get
Mhm.
to a sufficient percentage,
Right.
then
Yep.
we can start to
Mhm.
really push for it. Yeah, but yeah, you have to have that buy-in. Otherwise, as you say, you can't just have them imposing a law from on high
Yep.
because there'll be
Mhm.
huge pushback. It has to be that buy-in.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, but back on track.
Mm.
So these are
Well,
ways, these are the kind of things that you don't, if you're anti-woke, you gotta know this. You can't confuse woke with the criticism of marriage and so forth. Or you can't call woke red pill woke because that just makes no sense. And it's not woke when women actually work and take responsibility because
right.
women working is traditionally consistent, whether these idiots like it or not.
Through most of history, women
Mhm.
worked because
Yeah,
society
right,
wasn't wealthy enough to have them not working.
right, yeah, sure. And the most fake, aside from the circumcision thing, that hypocrisy, the most hypocritical, moronic, non-anti-woke thing you could say is man up.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And this is the type of thing. The type of thing we're talking about is stuff obviously that is the type of thing that first attracted me to a voice man all those years ago. The first
Mhm.
time I found people who saw the world that I did. You can reject woke, but you also have to reject that traditionalism and that obligation on men to man up. That's right.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I've done gone everywhere with this one. I know it's one of my longer rants, but that's basically what I had to
No,
say
good.
about that.
No, good.
I do have one more subject if you've got nothing else.
Sure. Before I do have one quick comment. I recalled the name of the Deep Space Nine group that I was talking
Mhm.
about that I think is mildly anti-woke. It's called Deep Space Nine Lovers. That's what it's actually
Okay,
called. So,
got it. Yeah.
yep, yep.
Right,
So
yeah.
maybe I'll see a few people on there.
Sure, sure. Didn't you add me to that group? I don't know. It's starting to sound familiar to me.
Maybe I did, but if I
I
haven't, I will.
probably, yeah, yeah, yeah. There might have been something like that. So,
Yeah.
mhm. Okay.
So, yes, so the only one I've got left is Zoe McClellan, which of course I can talk
Well,
about at the end.
so I think it's inappropriate to not talk about this one because and you people listening are going to have to help me out here because I do not know this person. I only know that he was somewhat associated with the Save Indian Family Foundation. There was an Indian man, Atul Subhash, that released a great statement of last wishes before he committed suicide, and a lot of it it had to do with the atrocious is not the right word to describe how egregious the Indian family court system is. But
Yeah, yeah.
so if you see any buzz about Atul Subhash, give it a read. And this, it's
Absolutely.
actually kind of
Look,
making some waves now. Like people are actually kind of picking
yes,
up on this
yes.
thing, and I think yeah. So
I, I
uh,
believe people like Anil Kumar, who of course we know well, and some other members of Save India Family Foundation have been appearing in the media in India. You're right, it is making a splash. It's so awful that this man had to die in order for
mhm,
this splash to be made.
right.
So he was at ICMI 23, which I presented at. I spoke to a lot of people at ICMI 23. I don't know if I met this gentleman. I don't recall meeting him, but there were a lot of people there, so I don't think I met him.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's just what when you read about what happened to him, it's just absolutely awful. So poor guy. Um, anyway, I guess hopefully some good can come out of it, and that maybe Indian society will recognize the problem a bit more. But it's awful.
Yeah.
So thank you very
Yeah.
much for bringing that up. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sometimes, I wish I knew people more and more about a given subject, and I wish I knew more about how it is in India and the men's movement there. So
So,
I don't always feel qualified to speak about this one, but I felt that I kind of had to kind of give
well,
it a
I
mention at the
know
very least.
absolutely. I know a lot of Indian MRAs these days. I should actually introduce you. I didn't realize you didn't know more of them. I will introduce you to Anil if you
Yeah.
have.
Well, I'm new in general, but you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's always
yeah,
not once have I
yeah,
claimed that I knew it all. I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot more for me
No.
to, you know,
Yeah, yeah. No, they're very organized. Actually, SIF is really much more organized than we are. It's quite sophisticated in terms of its organizational structure and so forth. So we found it really interesting going there to India, and I've talked to Anil before and a few of the other people, but
yeah.
it was really quite interesting to look at it and look at the organization. So no, and they've got very specific problems. If you look at, there's actually a documentary, there's actually two documentaries now. So there's Martyrs of Marriage. It was done quite a number of years ago.
Hmm.
And there's another one now, Sons of India, I believe it's called. I haven't seen Sons of India yet. Let me just
Hmm.
confirm if that's the name of it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there's a couple of documentaries that have been done on the problems. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, I hope I'm not misquoting the name of that
Hmm. Right.
that documentary. Yeah, sorry. See if I can pick it up. Um, no, India's
Well,
Sons, not Sons of India.
Indians,
India's Sons.
Indian sons.
20
Okay.
India's Sons. Yeah, sorry about
Okay.
that. Anyway, yes. So couple of documentaries that talk about it. The guys in SIF are doing some great work in raising the issues. There are a number of issues that are Indian specific, but there are also a lot of the same Indian issues that men face in the West. So
Right. Yeah. Sure. So, if you want to learn more about this, the X account that's giving this the coverage it deserves is the Save Indian Family Foundation. It's that's the group that is talking the most about this. Is It's the place to read up about on Atul and his suicide. So yeah, that's the place to go.
yeah, no, thank you very much for bringing that one up.
Hmm. Right. And it is a more serious note, but that's
Mm.
what I have to end on. So
Yeah. So the final item I have is, of course, Zoe McClellan. And I think we've had
yes.
a really good discussion tonight. So I'll
Hmm.
just finish up with Zoe. Okay. So as of December 2024, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McClellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McClellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing there. McClellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McClellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McClellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Yep. Catch you later.
Talk to you next time. Bye.
Yeah.